We'll call the meeting to order, and I need to read into the record a short statement. As chair of the Concord, New Hampshire Planning Board, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there's no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We're utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through clicking on the following website address, and that is zoom.us/J/754076629, or by dialing the following phone number, 929-208-6099, and entering the password 754076629. For those calling in who would like to provide public testimony, dial *9 to alert the host that you want to speak. The host will unmute you during the public hearing portion of the meeting. B, to provide public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public meeting of how to access the meeting using the Zoom platform, and instructions were provided on the City of Concord's website, and that is at www.concordnh.gov/273/planning board. And C, provide a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem with access, please call 603-568-8515 or send an email to planning@concordnh.gov. The planning staff is in the office to take those emails and answer the phone. And D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes are going to be taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. When each member states their presence, also please state whether there's anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. With that, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Chairman Woodson?
Here, and I am alone.
Member Hicks?
Here, and I'm alone in the room.
Member Pierce?
Here, and I am alone in the room.
Member Rosenberger?
Here and alone in the room.
Member Regan?
Here and alone in the room.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we will open the meeting. We will go right into our first agenda item, which is approval of the May 20th minutes. All the members of the board received those minutes. Anybody have any changes? If not, we'll take a motion to approve those minutes as submitted. If someone would like to motion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made by Councilor Pierce, seconded by Teresa Rosenberger. We'll do a quick roll call vote. All those in favor? Heather?
Chairman Woodfin?
Yeah, aye.
Member Hicks?
Aye.
Councilor Pierce?
Aye.
Member Rosenberger?
Aye.
Member Regan?
Aye.
Okay, so minutes are approved. That moves us to item 4 on the agenda. A quick little agenda overview. Nothing's been pulled from the consent agenda item, and all items that are put on the agenda and published will be heard tonight. So we'll move right on to item 5, which is architectural design review by consent. So in our item 5 here, we have 2 items. Five. Looks like 5A and then probably 5B, but there's no 5B on there. Heather, if you could read those 2 into the record. If any member of the audience wishes to have an issue with any of these 2 issues, that'll be read into the record here. If you could please make yourself known to the planning staff who will pull them from consent. If not, we'll approve them by consent.
Chairman, do you mind? I've actually got someone on the attendees who has had their hand raised since we started, and I'm only concerned. I have 3 numbers here who I'm concerned may be board members.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
That don't have their names listed. So what I'm going to do, person with your hand raised, is I'm gonna lower everyone's hands, and please If you are not a board member, do not raise your hand. When an item arises that you wish to speak to, at that time you can raise your hand so that I know when to during a public hearing when to unmute you and let the chairman and the board know that you're there to speak. But if there are any board members who have called in who have not been called, could you please raise your hand on the Zoom platform? Okay, so it looks like there are just 3 numbers of members of the public who would like to provide testimony. So yeah, let me just reiterate, anyone who would like to provide testimony when that item is called, please raise your hand at that time, and I will find out who you are and we will allow you to speak.
Okay, since there's only 2 items on the consent agenda, I'm going to pull them both off consent, Heather, and we'll just address them one at a time,
Okay.
so we don't miss anybody's thoughts. So let's go ahead and read item 5A into the record if we could.
Sure. Eric Stevens requests ADR approval for the installation of a new externally illuminated monument sign at 63 Bog Road in the residential open space district. As far as I know, this went to ADR and was recommended approval, though they had a few issues with, they didn't like the gold lettering, but it was just a suggestion, I think, to not have it. Is that correct, Sam?
The gold lettering was with a separate application. The planning board or the ADR committee, they recommended approval as submitted. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is the application for the wedding event venue out on Bog Road, right?
Correct.
We approved last year. Okay. All right. Any member of the audience wish to speak against this application for this sign? If anybody does, if you could please make yourself known. Any member of the board wish to pull this item or have any concerns or conditions regarding this this application? No? Any member of the
Mr.
audience?
Chair,
Yes. Yep.
Chairman, this is Councilor Pierce.
Yep.
It dawns on me as I look at this item 5A, I don't have a problem with it, but I am in a abutter. They're actually across the street from my neighborhood. I think am I technically an abutter?
You probably are in a butter, but unless you have a financial gain or any financial interest in the barn at Bull Meadow Wedding and Event Center, you can confidently sit and discuss it with us and vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Heather, any member of the audience have any questions on it? No? Okay, so would someone like to make a motion to grant that sign application as submitted with ADR? Actually, no ADR recommendation, so granted as submitted.
Removed. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Let's do a roll call vote if we could, Heather, on approval for this.
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
You have it.
Okay, so that passes. Next item on the agenda is 5B, which is PS Construction on behalf of Patriot Investments requesting ADR approval for the facade renovations at 4 Park Street in the Central Performance District, the CBP district. If any member of the audience has questions, concerns regarding this application, please make yourself known. The application looks pretty straightforward. Sam, was there any ADR comments or questions that you'd like to bring up? I think it was just a replacement sign.
It's actually, they're redoing the facade. It's currently stucco and some of it is falling off the brick. So they're going to put a brick veneer over that. ADR's only questions were how they were tying it into the corners, and the applicant answered them fully, and ADR has no problems with it.
Great. Okay, so no questions or issues from ADR. Any member of the audience, Heather, have their hand up?
Nope.
Okay. Any member of the board have any questions or concerns regarding this application? If not, we'll take a motion to approve as submitted.
Removed. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Again, roll call vote for approval of this application.
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passes. That'll move us into a public hearing section of tonight's agenda. We'll move into item 6A. If we could read that into the record, Madam Clerk.
Nobis Group, on behalf of St. Paul School, requests conditional use permit approval to allow buffer disturbance in the Shoreline Protection District for installation of chiller units at 25 to 29 Hockey Lane in the institutional district. I believe Beth may have a summary, and Chris Nato is on the line, and I'm allowing him to speak now.
Great. So if we could get a quick staff update on this, that would be great.
Sure, it's a pretty simple project. The site, if you look in the supplemental information, there's photos. It's already disturbed. And they went before the Conservation Commission last week, and the Conservation Commission agreed it was already disturbed. This wasn't going to be any additional impacts to the shoreline buffer. So they didn't have any issues with it. So we're recommending approval.
Okay. Is Chris Nato on the line?
Yes,
Yeah,
could you just open the public hearing?
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and we'll welcome you to the table. Mr. Nato, if you could state your name and your affiliation.
Sure. Chris Neto with Nobis Group. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
All right, great. So again, this is just a replacement of the chiller units at the hockey center. We're putting in two 12 by 24 concrete pads right up against the building on the back side that's adjacent to Library Pond. About a little under 1,200 square feet of disturbance, but it's all previously disturbed with either it has a little grass and some concrete slabs, but there's actually a gravel driveway that runs between where these units are going in and the pond itself. So we're set right up against the building. And
Okay.
That's really it. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, we'll look to the public. Heather, if you can see any public questions coming up, if you could let me know. If not, Beth, you have a question or comment?
We forgot to do a determination of completeness and
Okay,
regional.
I will do
Okay.
that. So let's step one step back. So this is this application has been determined complete by staff. So there's an ADR component. It is not a development of regional impact. So we do need to have a motion to find the application complete, open the public hearing, and note that it's not a development of regional impact. If someone would like to make that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilor Pierce, seconded by Matt Hicks. Again, roll call vote if we can. Heather, for all those in favor? Aye for chairman.
Sure, was that seconded by Member Regan or Member Hicks? Okay,
Member Regan.
apologize.
Okay. Pick one.
Okay, all right. Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Yes.
Member Hicks.
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, so that was on my cheat sheet here, Heather, and I just skipped right over it. So
No worries.
one for you. We'll put one in your column. Okay, so and thank you, Beth, for making that note. So any comments from the board regarding this application? Any comments, questions, concerns for the applicant? No? And Heather, nothing from the staff, nothing from the public? Okay, so before us, we've got in our recommendations, 3.1 is to grant conditional use approval, conditional use permit approval to allow the disturbance of the shoreline protection district buffers subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions, and those are outlined in precedent conditions 1 and 2, subsequent conditions 1. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that conditional use permit as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by, I can't remember who did that.
Regan. Member Regan.
Regan, and seconded by Councilor Pierce. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks.
Aye.
Member Regan.
Still aye.
Still aye. Okay, so that motion carries and passes. So good luck, Chris. Thank you very much for that. And we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 6B. If we could read that into the record.
BL Companies, on behalf of CP Concord LLC, request minor subdivision approval for a condominium subdivision at 310 Loudon Road in the Gateway Performance District. Let me see, I've got who I've got here.
There's Matt.
Matt and Jen Marks is what I got on my list here.
And I guess
Um,
while I figure while I
Yeah, I'll do determination of completeness on this as well, right? Okay. Let's do a determination of completeness. So again, staff, Beth, staff found this application complete. Is this yours?
Yes, it is. Yep,
Yes, okay.
complete and not a development of regional impact.
And not a development of regional impact, right?
Right.
Okay, so the application's been found complete and not a development of regional impact. Someone like to make a motion to open the public hearing for this application?
So moved.
Second.
Made by, motion made by Councilor Pierce and seconded by John Regan or Matt?
Matt this time.
You guys sound the same. Okay, so again, roll call vote. All those in favor?
Sorry, Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Regan,
Aye.
Member Hicks.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll open the public hearing and welcome the applicant to the table. If we could have one at a time, if I think I've got on my list here, Jen Marks, if you could introduce yourself and tell us who you're with, and Matthew Bruton, if you could do the same.
Yes, hello, this is Jennifer Marks. I'm the head of the Land Surveying Division at BL Companies, and I'm at this meeting alone.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Matt Bruton. I'm an engineer and project manager at BL Companies. I'm in my house alone, except for a 2-year-old running it from time to time.
We won't hold that against you. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
I got one other 800 number or 860 number, Heather. I don't know who that is at the bottom.
If it's 6467, that's my cell phone number.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's get a quick staff report on this, if we could.
Sure. So this is a condo subdivision. This is a building that formerly housed Toys R Us, if you're all familiar with that, on Loudon Road. So it's just using the existing building. They're condoizing half the building, and one half of the building is including a green space that was formally approved to be a building expansion as phase 2 back in 1999. There's currently no plans to build that expansion, and they will be coming before you if that does happen in the future. But just wanted to clarify that. Because it's a subdivision in a performance district, we have to do the comprehensive development plan approval, which we're recommending. They requested several waivers, which we've outlined. We're supportive of a few of them, and then we're recommending denial of a few of them. We have corresponded with the applicant, and we're recommending that those be completed as conditions of approval.
Okay. So there's a bunch of waivers in here. So I'm looking at the application here. So we have 3 that staff is recommending approval of the waivers and 3 that staff is recommending denial. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. So the applicant, you kind of know where we stand on it. If you can just give us a quick overview of the project. I think it's just a straightforward subdivision, but if there's any issues, if you could tell us what they are and why the waivers are important, that would be great.
Not a problem. Again, Matt Bruton from BL Companies for the record. I'll just give you a quick, minute and a half overview, right? So you guys are all aware, 5-acre parcel, formerly Toys R Us in the Gateway Performance District. All the abutters are in that same zone. You got Walmart, restaurants, and other retail facilities. Paved parking lot with access drives to Loudon and also a connection to Walmart and all the utilities in place. The goal of the application for our client, CP Concord LLC, is to really subdivide the building into 2 spaces. One portion of the building and the portion of the building and the adjacent green space, as someone has on the screen there now. Everything else will be common space, the parking lot, the drive aisles, everything else. The idea of this is to be able to split this into 2 so we can attract 2 distinct tenants that have control over their own destiny. There's no proposed site work at this time for anything, building facade, parking lot, grading, utilities, any of that nature, hence the reason for all the requests for waivers. The 3 that the staff voted to deny, we understand those. We just can't provide those at this time because we don't have 2 defined tenants. The 3 waivers that were denied were the condo declaration and bylaws, acceptable means for water metering and water service, and provide location size and invert elevations of proposed sanitary sewers. We are happy to provide all of those things as soon as we have two tenants that we can share with the commission. And as Beth stated, if we're looking to do any proposed work, either expanding the building to match the previous approval from the 90s or do any modifications, we are aware we need to come back to the board to discuss all of those changes. So that's a quick recap. Happy to have any questions if you have any.
Okay, so I do have a question. So unit 1 is going to be the tool place, right?
Yes, unit 1 is on the left side with that dot hatch.
Yeah.
There is a tenant in mind, but nothing is confirmed yet with a signed lease. That one is closer to a deal. The hashed mark on the right, which is unit 2, includes the rest of Toys R Us plus the adjacent green space. They're further away from finding a tenant for either that space or expanding that space.
Okay, so when I look at that, so you're cutting the old Toys R Us space in half. If I look at the building, it's kind of right in the middle. They're right where that mouse just was just a second ago, but right in the middle, that's where the kind of the Toys R Us was on one side, Babies R Us or whatever it was on the other side, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Approximately half. It's going to follow a column line, so it's easy to split on the inside.
Okay, so the hatched area for the tool places is in theory good to go. So this is one giant unit that's over on the right hand side, or are there going to be two units over there?
It's one giant unit. It includes half the building and then the adjacent green space. Hypothetically, if there's a user that will use the second half of the building, that's great. The green space will remain green space. If there's a user that wishes to have more square footage, we'd obviously look to expand into that green space to make the square foot larger. We know that there was a previous approval that did allow that, and utilities are stubbed into that area. And we do know that if we do pursue that, we would have to come back to you guys to show you detailed plans and architecture.
Okay, so Beth, what you had said before, so that in our packet, we've got the recommendation from staff to grant those 3 waivers, to flat out deny the other waivers on the other 3 waivers. What did you say about making them conditions of approval?
Yeah, so typically for condo subdivisions, this is what we do. They make it's usually part of the packet. We record the declaration with the plan. So once we have a final plan, the assessor's office likes to be able to review the condo declaration before everything's recorded. It just helps them for tax purposes down the line. So we're recommending that the waiver be denied and that it made a condition of approval that they provide those documents to the city before the plan gets recorded.
Okay. And Matthew or Jennifer, that doesn't affect you. I mean, obviously you'd like to get all the waivers, but it doesn't affect you as far as moving forward, right?
No, we're happy for those to be conditions of approval. As soon as we have 2 defined tenants, we'll be able to provide all of those 3. Just a little hard at this point with an unknown tenant.
Got it. Okay. All right. So any other questions or comments from the board to this applicant? Heather, any member of the audience wish to speak again? No? I can hear the dog, so there you go. We've got, let's close the public hearing then. Is that okay? We can do that, Heather? I think we're good. So we'll close the public hearing. And any comments, questions, concerns from the board? If not, before us on our packet here, we've got item 5.3 is to grant minor subdivision approval for the condominium subdivision at 310 Loudon Road, subject to the following precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 1 year. Actually, excuse me, let's back up and handle the waivers first. I apologize, it's running out of order here. So let's
So
look
do the
at
CDP first.
Yeah, look at number 1, 4.1. Is that right?
Yep.
Beth? Yeah.
Yes.
So I was on the next page already. I was moving right along. So 4.1 is to grant the CDP, the comprehensive development plan approval for the creation of 2 condominium units with common areas at 310 Loudon Road in the CWP district. Let's go ahead and, should we do this one at a time or, yep, so we'll do them one at a time. So someone like to make a motion to grant that comprehensive development plan approval as outlined?
So moved.
I'll move.
Second.
To be accepted.
Councilor Pierce, you the second on that? So it was motion was made and seconded, I believe, by Mr. Regan and Mr. Pierce. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. All those in favor?
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Counselor Pierce.
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, so 4.1 passes. The 4.2 is to grant the following waiver request using the criteria of RSA 674-44 3E1 as guidance indicating strict conformity would pose unnecessary hardship to the applicant. So that is outlined in number 1, which is waiver to sections 12.083 and 15.034 to not provide existing topography conditions and all proposed changes. Waiver to sections 12.035, 12.035, 12.07, and 15.013 to not provide a wetland survey by New Hampshire certified wetland scientist, and 3 to waiver to section 15.0311 to not provide the location size and invert elevations of existing storm sewers only. Can we take these, Beth, and 4.2 and 4.3 as one approval? So we grant the approval on those and then deny the others, or do them separately?
I would do them separately.
Okay, so 4.2 is so eloquently outlined by your chair here. 4.2, 1, 2, and 3. If someone would like to make a motion to grant those waiver requests as outlined.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Council Pierce, seconded by Mr. Regan. All those in favor? Aye from the chair.
Chairman Woodfin, aye. Counselor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks.
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, and then 4.3 is to deny the following waivers indicating that the request did not meet the criteria of RSA 674-44 3E, and that is outlined in sections. Number 1 is a waiver to sections 1302.11, 1701.4, and 17.06 condominium declaration and bylaws. Do not provide condominium declaration and bylaws until after tenant leases are secured. Number 2 is waiver to section 1704.3. Do not provide acceptable means for water metering and water service until after tenants and floor plans are secured. And 3, waiver to section 1503.11 to not provide the location size and invert elevations of existing and proposed sanitary sewers. Someone like to make a motion to deny those waivers under 4.3?
I had a question.
Yep.
Items 2 and 3, Beth, how do those get addressed in the approval? Do those get addressed under the technical comments of engineering review, or?
Yep, they'll have to provide those in the body of my report as well as in the engineering report. So they can provide a separate plan with that information.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
I move that we deny the waivers as listed.
I'll second.
Okay, motion was made by Councilor Pierce, seconded by John Regan. All those in favor? Aye.
Chairman Woodfin, Counselor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, and then 5.3 is to grant minor subdivision. It's a following precedent. Conditions to be fulfilled with 1 year and prior to endorsement of the final plans, and that is outlined in conditions 1 through 8. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval as outlined? Councilor Pierce, is that a motion?
Okay, I move. I was giving
Second.
someone else a chance.
I will
Someone like to
second. John likes it.
Okay, John seconds. So all those in favor, again by roll call?
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Counselor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, that one passes. Thank you very much for your participation and good luck with that project. Let's move on to item 6.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for participating.
Good luck. Get someone in that building.
You got it. Thanks so much for your time. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. You too. Okay, let's move on to item 6C, if we could read that into the record.
John Torlian requests major subdivision approval for the creation of 8 condominium units at 131 North State Street in the neighborhood residential district. Staff does recommend the application be determined complete, not a project of development of regional impact, and to open the public hearing.
Okay, so we have a determination of completeness component. We have determined that the development is not of regional impact. So someone like to make a motion to find the application complete, not a public, not a development of regional impact, and open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Pierce, seconded by Matt Hicks. All those in favor?
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, so while we line up the participants, if we could get a quick staff update on this project.
Sure. So this is the condo plan that kind of wraps up the major site plan. That was the redevelopment of the previous church lot. As Heather stated, this creates 8 individual condo units. Engineering had no comments. I have very limited comments, and I'll turn it over to John.
Okay, so we'll welcome Mr. Chorley to the table. In theory, the table. Welcome, John.
Hi.
Okay, I guess if you could give us a quick update. I don't know if you need to update us on anything, John, for this, or if it's just
I think I can
pretty
be
straightforward.
quite brief. I was before you a year ago for major site plan, and we are virtually at the end of the construction of all the improvements that were part of that major site plan. Move-ins beginning later this month, and really we're at the last step, which is the creation of the condominium, which, although technically a major subdivision with 8 units, I would submit as a pretty simple and straightforward step at this stage. So I won't belabor the presentation other than to just sort of amplify what Sam said. It's 8 units. They're 1,800 square foot homes, each with attached garages, front porches, private backyards, and a lot of shared amenities, which are sort of the hallmarks of a pocket neighborhood. A large central courtyard with a 1/8 of a mile brick walkway. So I mean, if you walk around it 8 times or mow it back and forth 8 times, you've done a mile. Some community patios, which I hope will be enjoyed by the residents, and some community gardens, raised beds that are already being planted by the incoming buyers. So it's been
Nice.
a tiring but fun project, and I would ask that you approve this final step as staff recommends.
Great. It looks good. I was by it today. Looks like you're getting the final pieces and parts are coming together. So
Really are. I'm happy with it.
great, great. Any questions from the board? Any members of the board have any questions, concerns regarding this?
This is Councilor Pierce. Just a quick question. Are they all sold?
Yes, they are. I have been lucky on
Congratulations.
the last couple projects to have them sold quietly, before starting really. So I think
Great.
for any other developer listening, there's demand for these things. I mean, there really is. And part of that is that I increasingly find that people town shop. And the earlier projects I used to do, virtually everybody was relocating, downsizing from within Concord. And the last couple projects, there are a host of buyers from outside the community who really could live, virtually anywhere, and they are affirmatively choosing to live in Concord, and I find that very encouraging.
That is encouraging. That is encouraging. Good. Well, they look good, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more about the role and the other pieces of the property as well. So, okay. No members of the board have any other members of the board have questions, comments? Heather, any member of the audience have any questions or hands up? No. Okay, so we will close the public hearing and move right into the recommendations on this from staff. We've got in your packet 3.1 is to grant the minor subdivision approval for the major condominium subdivision at 131 North State Street, subject to the following conditions to be fulfilled within 1 year. And that's outlined in conditions 1 through 7. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval as outlined?
I'll move approval.
Motion was made by Council Pierce. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by John Regan. All those in favor by roll call?
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Councilor Pierce,
Aye to a great asset to the neighborhood.
Member Regan,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks.
Aye, my church. Aye.
Aye, my church. Okay, that passes. Thank you very much, John, for your good work over there, and good luck with the next project.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6D in our agenda. HB Engineers, if you could read that into the record, Madam Clerk.
Yeah, actually, if you wouldn't mind, two things. Number one, I see one of our attendees who I believe was here for an ADR application for Park Street. And I just wanted to let that person know that we did go over the ADR applications and they were all approved. So he joined kind of late. So I think it was for Park Street, and that is approved, and we've moved on from that. So
we've moved on.
Yes. The other thing is, do you mind if I take 6D and 6E together? They're both
Yep.
Yep. And I think it makes sense to do them together.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be great.
HEB Engineers on behalf of the state of New Hampshire requesting review in accordance with 67454. It's the state project. They did a minor subdivision for a new lot that was created from I-89 limited access right-of-way off Silk Farm Road. It's in the residential open space district. As far as I know, this was already recorded. It was approved by the governor, as far as I know. And then we also have Allen and Major Associates, which did the major site plan, which was a construction of 2 new buildings and associated parking and site improvements off of Silk Farm Road, a facilities building and a smaller building. And I do have, I will let Sam give a little summary. And I have Michael Malinowski, who I'm allowing to talk, and he perhaps can let me know if there is anyone else I should be allowing who's on.
Okay, so we'll get a quick staff update from Sam, if we could.
Sure. Heather covered the meat of it. They are creating a new lot out of 89 right-of-way. They're transferring DOT land to DES, so this is going to be an operation facility building as well as a proposed watershed building. So 2 buildings, plenty of drainage improvements as well. This will be right off of Silk Farm Road, just south of the 89 overpass.
Okay, and we'll welcome Mr. Malinowski to the table. If you could state your name and your affiliation for the record.
Yes, my name is Michael Malinowski. I'm with Allen and Major Associates. We are the civil engineers for the project. I believe Keith Hemingway should be on the line as well from the state of New Hampshire.
I can allow him to talk. I don't see anybody by that name, but I have 2 phone numbers. One ends in 6177 and one ends in 0967. So Keith, if you are there and you would like to speak, could you please raise your hand in the, through the Zoom platform? Yep, that's him. Found him. So now you are allowed to talk. Gotcha.
We gotcha. Welcome to the table. If you could state your name for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Keith Hemingway. I'm a project manager for the New Hampshire Division of Public Works.
Great, well, welcome. So my understanding in talking to staff is you guys are relocating some services that were currently in another part of the city to this new location. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I don't think we have I don't have any questions or concerns regarding it. I did want to ask, again, we're on the record, so if you can answer us on the record with anything, but anything planned for the space that you're abandoning off of 2nd Street?
To answer that, I believe Jim Gallagher from DES.
Oh.
He is head of this project for DES. I don't know if he's available.
He is.
His hand's up. We'll bring him in as well.
Yeah,
there he is.
Yeah.
So he's muted. He's muted on his end. I don't know if Mr. Gallagher, you can unmute yourself.
I just unmuted him. He's allowed to speak, but I just.
Oh, there he goes. There he is.
Yes, my name is Jim Gallagher. I'm chief of the Dam Bureau for the Department of Environmental Services, and we are relocating a facility that we currently located down at Sewell's Falls in the old hydropower building down there to this new facility on Silk Farm Road. That property, all that property is owned by the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. All the development, the 90 acres, the parkland, and we were allowed to use that facility since the Fish and Game Department acquired that back in the 80s for our construction crew, for our dam operators. That property is going to be reverted to the Fish and Game Department, who indicated that they're going to be using it for storage in the short term.
Okay. So they're gonna continue using it.
That's correct.
Okay. Great. Okay, so this is a 674 project, so not much we're going to have other than input. I don't know if we have any staff input or any input from the board. Any board members wish to chime in regarding, again, not the use of the old space, but the new space on Silk Farm Road. I think Heather, you said it's already been approved and already gone through from the state side, right?
The subdivision was recorded. That doesn't really, I don't know, approve site plans, but they're just here to present their project to you and answer any questions if you have any. I guess I would ask if they have anything they'd like to share.
Yeah, and so if you guys have anything, I mean, we have the plans on our in our section in our packets here. Again, seems pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any comments or questions you want to bring up, or have anything that you want to tell us about the project, that would be great.
Mike, is there anything specific you wanted to discuss, or?
No, we can go over the plans. I'm not sure. I have a color plan, Heather.
Yeah, I can promote you to a panelist.
I don't know that we need to, Heather. I don't know if do we need to go through the plans?
Well, no, just if they.
I just wanted.
If they would like to share, they're able to.
Yeah, I mean, we have them. So if there's any questions from the board level, I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think there's anything we can add to it, but I don't want to assume.
Sam can also share them, but Michael, you are a panelist now. If you'd like to share.
All right, there we go. I had to unmute myself.
Oh.
Michael from Allen Major Associates. We did receive some staff comments from both Heather and Sam relative to the preliminary site plans package that we had submitted. We have addressed most of those as they relate to City of Concord items relative to some work that's going to happen out in the right-of-way, as well as some site plan issues. It's relatively straightforward. I can share. If you can see my screen.
Yep.
So we have two buildings going in. We've got this one right here, which is about 22,000 square feet. That'll be the main building for the DS Dam Bureau operations. They will provide construction support out of this facility. So they will have loading bays that they can do repairs inside the building. They also have storage. So they're moving their operations up to this facility. We are providing 2 handicap parking spots in this area. The majority of the space that's around the site will be compacted gravel. One of the comments that come up from staff was relative to parking. We have parking spaces delineated just to show that we have room, but as they're gravel, they won't necessarily be demarcated in that space. We also have an approximately 6,900 square foot facility here. This would be for the Watershed Bureau through DES. They will have storage here for boat, scuba equipment, things of that nature to support their operations. We have a little over 100,000 square feet worth of disturbance, so we are filing with DES for an alteration of terrain bureau permit that is currently under review. The majority of the site will be sheet flow. We do have several large stormwater basins one in this location here and one in this location here, which will treat the stormwater from the site down to below pre-development rates. One of the comments that had come up relative to staff was the driveway that we have shown. We have just a short section of paved as it goes out to Silk Farm Road. As it goes under Silk Farm, it's actually, it terminates just after 89, so it's a dead end on that side. We originally had it at 30 feet. Staff had requested that we shave that down a bit to 28. We were actually able to accommodate that request in this location. On-site water will be provided by a well located at this location. We also have provisions for an on-site septic, which will handle the flow from the commercial space here, as well as the small watershed building here. There are.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
What is a watershed building?
So the Watershed Building is another small one-story building that supports the Watershed Bureau through.
Okay, so not physically watershed, like water coming off the roof. Okay.
No. There are provisions for fire cisterns that we are providing in this location here with a fire pump that will provide fire suppression for both the DES building and the Watershed Building as well.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on parking.
Okay.
Michael,
Yes.
who would be parking there? Would members of the public be going to this building, or is that for employees?
And no, this facility is it'll be a locked facility, so it's just DES staff that'll be up there. So it'll be workers and personnel. So it's not open to the general public.
Okay, thank you.
And this is, you said just before, so if I'm coming down Silk Farm Road, you go, is it just before the, you go underneath 89, so it's just before the cutoff for the St. Paul School Road?
It's just south of the overpass, so if you can see where my
I see it.
cursor is, that's about where the overpass is. This is the bike trail that runs down along the Autobahn. So this is the paved path here.
Okay.
That sort of goes out the West End Farm Trail.
Okay.
You can actually see a portion of this site from 89 is actually a clearing and a bypass that comes right off of 89 in this location here.
All right. Thank you. Any other points or questions the board has regarding this application?
I had two, Rich.
Yep.
One is this seems like it's a pretty prominent location in terms of people using the area for either biking or walking the bike path, and also getting access to the trails down at St. Paul's. And I know I don't usually ask these questions, but I was wondering about landscaping of the building, because it is sort of in an area right now that sort of is pretty pastoral. Is there any plans for landscaping? Because it will be quite a change to the appearance of that area.
I will leave that one up to Keith to answer. Probably answer that best.
There is, we're going to try to retain as much of the existing vegetation around the building and the driveways as much as possible. And if we do have enough money in the budget, we will prepare a landscaping plan and bring it to the city for approval.
I guess we're not really approving anything, but to the extent that we provide any feedback.
Well, for review.
Right. And I would just strongly urge you doing that and finding the money. I know it's not an easy time to find money, but I think the landscaping would pay off in the long run for that area. My second question was, the driveway is fairly close. The end of that road really just gets a lot of bike, pedestrian traffic, and a few cars that just because the road ends right on the north side of 89. Do you expect any sort of traffic issues with people using the trail, the bike trail?
Jim Gallagher might be able to speak to the traffic coming and going out of that site.
Hi, this is Jim Gallagher again from DES. Our crew, our operators are going to be using the operations building. They come in at 6 a.m, gather there, get their equipment, and then go off to a dam reconstruction site. The dam operators, we have 3 that will be using that facility. They come again at around 6 a.m, get the equipment they need for operation and maintenance of the state dams, and then they leave. And they come back at 3:30 and then leave for the day. Likewise, in the Watershed Building, we call it the Watershed Building. Actually, there's going to be 2 activities in there. Our Watershed Bureau that does the sampling of the rivers and the lakes in the state. It's essentially a boat storage facility. They'll come in, and their work is largely in the summertime. They'll come in very early, get their boats, go off and do their work, come in at the end of the day. And the other half of the building is for DES's spill response unit that just will be using that facility to store their trucks, their spill response equipment, and would be mobilizing their out of there during a spill. So during the day, there largely won't be anybody in there. It's again for our facility, the Dam Bureau's facility. They will be doing some fabrication from time to time in the facility, but largely the folks will be gone at the beginning of the day and returning at the end of the day, and that'll be the extent of the traffic.
Thanks, Jim. And I guess, Keith, I would just emphasize, because it sounds like there's going to be a lot of equipment, and I know where Jim's stuff is stored on 2nd Street down Sewell's Falls, not the most attractive place. So I guess to the extent you could find money for landscaping, I think that would be nice to do.
Right. Also, we submitted some realistic renderings from different viewpoints around the site. I don't know if you have access to those.
I haven't seen those.
Sam, I think Sam has those.
I saw the ones with the buildings on them, with the flags in the middle, but I didn't. Let's see. Oh, I guess there's one on the highway too, but you can see it quite prominently from the highway.
Yeah, that's why we put the office building on that corner, the office cubicle there, cube on that corner to present, probably the best face of the facility to the highway, which is where it will be most visible from.
You mentioned you mentioned, Keith, that this would be locked. Is it you're going to have a fence, or is it going to be a fence in the driveway? Is it going to be also fenced all the way around?
It will be fenced all around.
Okay. Just chain link?
Yes.
Okay. So again, John, that might go to your comments regarding regarding the appearance from the Silk Farm Road, because it is kind of pastoral. It is, if you're coming from the Audubon and you're coming down for those roadways, maybe some privacy fence or some of the fencing that's got the plastic slats in it, or something to kind of mitigate a little bit of the the industrial look of having stuff stored and
Nice
parking
to have
areas and gravel. Yep.
Nice to have it try to blend with the character of the rest of the area.
Yep.
Right.
So I'm confident in our state brethren here that they'll be able to find a little bit of money to help us with the look and feel, and make it look good. So. Okay. Any other? You're always doing the right job, right, Keith?
Yeah, we try.
All right. Let's wrap this up. You got any other questions from the board? Any member of the audience, Heather, have any questions or comments regarding this? No?
Not seeing anything so far. No, looks good.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and close the public hearing, and we don't need to vote on anything or make a motion. This is just a notification to us, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we'll thank the participants for popping in. We appreciate your time and giving us a little insight as to what's happening with this, and we will move on. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that moves us out of Thank you. This moves us out of our public hearings sections and item C and on to item 7. If we could read item 7 into the agenda, into the record.
Sure. Item 7 is Hinckley Allen on behalf of Brixmor Capital requesting amendments to zoning ordinance articles 28.2.4 allowable principal uses and 28.5.17 certain uses in the Opportunity Corridor Performance District to allow restaurants with drive-through facilities in the OCP district and reduce drive-through stacking space requirements. I will give just a brief history of the requests, and then I will turn it over to Sam to do a summary of the report. So originally, Mayor Boulay put in a request for some zoning amendments. The property owners subsequently went to the zoning board and received a number of variances, which made some of those zoning amendment requests unnecessary. So they subsequently revised their petition request. So this report is a review and counter proposal, if you will, on that second revision that came to us, I believe, through John Arnold. We do have John Arnold on behalf of Brixmor and Robin Twersky on behalf of Brixmor, and I will allow them to speak in a minute, but at this moment, I'll turn it over to Sam to do a summary of the report.
Okay, so while I go over this, I will share my screen. I do have, the applicant did submit a full site plan application. They've requested to table the application while we work through this amendment process. So I will share the screen just so that we all can have something, a little bit of context. Okay. So there you are. Just a brief overview of what they're proposing. This is the corner of the Pleasant Street extension and Store Street. I do have architectural renderings I can share as well. But this is a proposed 110 grill, a restaurant.
Hey, Sam.
Yes.
Sam, just give us a mouse view here of where Store Street is, where Pleasant Street extension comes in, where Market Basket is. So that's Store Street.
Sure. Store Street right here. Yep. This is the Pleasant Street extension. You'd come around here. The boxing studio, the liquor store, Market Basket is right here.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So restaurant, proposed retail. The retail is attached, shares a building with a restaurant, a coffee shop, Starbucks, and there is space allocated for a drive-through right here. In staff's review of this proposal and this amendment request, we looked at almost 20 years of master plans, 4 separate plans, as well as a 2016 staff charrette for the redevelopment of this whole area. Essentially, we have envisioned the people before us, these 20 years of planning have envisioned this opportunity corridor redeveloped as an extension of Main Street. Main Street, obviously right now, especially demonstrated by the recent improvements, is very pedestrian oriented. You have buildings that front right on the sidewalk, and traffic, car traffic is fairly limited to just 2 lanes and some parking. So that is essentially the vision, a continuation of that down into this central opportunity corridor zone. So with that in mind, we took a look at this proposal. The real meat of this is the drive-through. There are some other items that they've requested as part of this amendment, but those are kind of secondary to the drive-through, as that all revolves around the drive-through element. We looked at the Institute of Traffic Engineers trip generation manual for drive-throughs with or coffee shops with drive-through windows, and it is one of the highest traffic generators of all traffic generators, as you can imagine, and also Starbucks being a popular commercial enterprise. We would essentially be bringing a significant amount of traffic. The actual numbers recognized by ITE are in the ballpark of, if I can find it in the report, around 400 peak hour trips. So 400 trips per hour, and that's scaled based on square footage of the restaurant. The restaurant is proposed to be around 2,700 square feet. So additional 400 trips in a pedestrian-oriented district is a little concerning. Additionally, we see this obviously as a continuation of Main Street. Main Street has multi-story buildings. In this district, in the OCP district, we have what's called a floor area ratio. A floor area ratio is basically a calculation of intensity of uses on a lot. So just like Main Street, you'd be able to build basically 0 lot lines. 100% of the lot could be allocated for a building. The floor area ratio in the OCP is 4.0. In the CBP, which Main Street is 3.0, meaning that the OCP can be more dense in theory than Main Street. This is really important because this obviously is a factor of tax revenue. So right now, the proposal is 2 single-story buildings, 3 uses. The vision for this district is just like Main Street. You have commercial enterprises on the 1st and 2nd stories with residential above. Obviously, the residential supports the commercial enterprises below and increases that density, increases the potential tax revenue. So one of the major concerns that staff has with this development proposal is that if this is essentially the first development in this district, this will set a tone for future development. And if it starts with single story, not mixed use, mainly just it's commercial without any residential, we are concerned that this will set a precedent and we will never fully realize the vision and the level of density that we would like to see. In the report, there are a number of pictures that we've grabbed from master plans, some renderings that kind of show you the ideal character of this district, as well as one that comes from the staff charrette where it introduces a grid street network, urban street grid. So it really does continue that Main Street feel. Again, the big issue is the drive-through, and that is very indicative of something up on Loudon Road or on Manchester Street where you have through traffic. It's a car-oriented area. It's a car-oriented use that is being proposed to be located in a pedestrian-oriented district. So staff's proposal for essentially a counter proposal would be to allow drive-throughs. All buildings within this district, all new development would have to be a minimum of 2 stories, essentially to try and help to realize that vision of greater density. So that is the meat of staff's proposal. And I will turn it over to Heather if she has anything to add.
Yeah, sure. Could you put us back to panel just so we can sort of see each other as we're talking? Yeah, so I'll also point out that so what staff is proposing is a minimum of 2 stories. And the reason that we're proposing that is an attempt to sort of mitigate the aspects of this request that we do not find consistent with the master plan or with the goals for the district. We are also proposing in the proposed draft of this district that we're working on right now with our consultants, the update to the zoning with the form-based code. Part of that proposal is to have a minimum of 2 stories in this district. So that's not adopted yet, but that's what we have in there as a proposal. And so, we said, why don't we just try to pull that ahead and pull that into this so that we're going to get those 2 stories and we're going to get that we're going to start that precedent and that pattern of density. So that was our attempt to sort of collaborate or compromise with the fact that, they really we do want development of this site. We don't want to stop development of the site. There are some really great aspects of what they're proposing. They do have the buildings on the street. There's some nice things about it. But I think our biggest concern is really setting a precedent for low density, essentially to some degree strip commercial type development in a location that really is supposed to be an extension of Main Street. And I don't think any of us could envision a drive-through anywhere on Main Street because that's not what Main Street is. The other thing I want to point out is their request for to reduce the stacking spaces in a drive-through. we did some research into this and we could find no basis whatsoever. In fact, the recommendations in other sources that we checked are for higher requirements than what we already have in Concord. So based on the past experience of stacking spaces in Concord and based on the research that we did into like best practices, we could not find any basis to say, yeah, go ahead and reduce the stacking spaces. However, we did also have a suggestion in that regard for a compromise, which would be to allow a reduction through a conditional use permit if an applicant can demonstrate through a traffic study or other technical documentation that they actually don't need them. So in other words, they provide us proof that they don't need all those stacking spaces, and then that would be presented to the board and they could get a conditional use permit to reduce the number. We felt like if they were backed with sort of technical data, that it would make sense to give that flexibility through a conditional use permit, but it doesn't make sense for really any other end user in the city or any other property that we're aware of. So we didn't want to make that a blanket for all uses and for all statements, but we did want to provide an avenue if Brixmor or anyone else can demonstrate that they don't need so many stacking spaces. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly. I do also want to mention before we invite our guests in to speak that we fairly recently have started communicating with them on what they could possibly do and what they can't do. So I just wanted to stress that, as staff, we would like to continue the conversations about options for mitigating some of the obstacles that they have to these 2 stories, and I will let them discuss those, and we can respond, and have a discussion later. But just to say that we have been talking with them and attempting to continue to discuss options and how to get this project to move forward. But again, as planning staff, we can only make so much of a recommendation. And then essentially, I think just one last thing before I stop is we're leaving it up to the board and then ultimately to council to determine whether this short-term economic development is more important than this legacy of planning documents that we have, because that's not necessarily our decision to make. We're looking at the master plans, we're looking at the vision, and our job is very simple. Is this consistent? And it really isn't. But having said that, if it's determined by the board or council that economic development of this site is a higher priority at this time, then maybe they will come to different conclusions. I don't feel that we have enough information as planning staff to make that determination and to recommend something different than what we already have. So with that,
can I hop in? So
yes, I'm done.
So
sorry.
I'd like to make a couple of comments before we open up the public piece and invite the applicant. Sam, are you able to share page 3 of your staff report on the screen here so I can talk to that for just a second? So I want to read you one highlighted section. When I was reading this yesterday or over the weekend, one piece that kept jumping out at me from the board's perspective was inconsistency with the master plans, and from staff's perspective, being able to go back and look at 4 master plans that address the vision for zoom in on that picture if you could, Sam, that allow you to go back and kind of look at the vision for this particular area. So I want to read you one passage that I have. For the central corridor of OCP district is consistent across the planning documents, which describe dense, walkable urban development with mix of uses, public space, and a connection to the Merrimack River. The Pleasant Street Store Street extension is described as the gateway to the redevelopment corridor that is intended to take an urban form similar to that of Main Street. Store Street is conceived as an extension of Main Street corridor characterized by multi-story buildings, the urban street grid, and pedestrian-oriented alleys, streetscapes, and plazas. Now, with that said, visions are great, and visions are, that's what we want to strive towards. If we're looking at this as the most important piece of the development of that particular corner, we got one shot at making this right. And I look at the screen here. So Pleasant Street extension will go up to your right, and what goes into the shopping plaza we go on your left. So the corner that we're talking about has got the little tree mocked up over there and the little bookstore maybe, or whatever it might be. This is beautiful. This to me would be a great looking store street. But I don't know how we get there. I don't know if again, to Heather's point, are we looking at short-term economic gain by putting a restaurant and a coffee shop in that particular spot, or are we looking at it from the long-term perspective? Now, this is private property. The developer will tell us what they want to do and how they're going to develop it, and how you can't block the people in behind it. But again, I look at this as kind of the how do you get to this particular piece? And I don't know that we have a drive-through restaurant or a drive-through Starbucks is going to give us that type of a look and feel in that particular location. So that said, I want to kind of open it up and let the applicant talk, and then we can banter around a little bit. But I want everybody to look at the image and say, okay, do we want to get there, or do we want to just develop it and move forward? So Heather, if you can promote them or open them up, we'll welcome them to the table. I see Mr. Arnold is listed there. Thank you, Sam, for doing that. If you could unmute them and we'll let them introduce themselves, that would be great. Tversky unmuted themselves. Yep.
So I'm Ruben.
Okay.
Maybe John wants to go to first, but Ruben Tversky, representative for Brixmore Property Group. I oversee all of the construction and development for this region, and happy to answer any questions, and also offer some testimony to what the plan is today, and comment on what you just mentioned, Chair, Heather, and Sam said as well, and open this up for a dialogue. So with that,
perfect.
I know John has some comments as well. So
thank you. Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
This is John Arnold. I'm with Hinckley Allen. I represent Brixmore. I would just like to state before we begin, I see that I'm not on video, but I do want you to know that I am wearing a tie tonight. It's the first time in about 2 months, and I look pretty presentable. So I just wanted to, I guess, give a little bit more context and background to the project as we get started. Brixmore owns the Capitol Shopping Center on Storrs Street, and this past winter it proposed to redevelop the front corner of the parking lot by constructing the two buildings that you saw on the site plan just a moment ago. One would be the Grill 110, one would be Starbucks with a drive-through and some additional retail space in it. I would like to pull up, Heather, if I can, just a rendering of what the development looks like that I have on my screen. Is that possible?
Yes, two things. One, you should be able to share your video. According to my screen, it says that your video is turned off. So I don't know if you see a button to turn on your video. We should be able to see you. You should also have on the bottom of your screen, I believe it's on the bottom, maybe a green button that says share screen. Do you see? There you are. Do you see?
To show you that I was telling the truth about the top.
Nice tie.
Credibility is up now, John.
Yeah.
You are wearing a tie.
Do you have it? Do you see the share screen option on your?
You got it here. Let me pull this up. Is that showing up for you?
Not yet. So you hit share screen, and then you usually have to choose the window that. There we go.
Okay. Thanks for your patience.
Yes, no problem.
So this is a rendering of what the proposal looks like. You can see
that looks much.
Excuse me.
That looks much nicer. Thank you for the rendering. That looks great. I don't mean to interrupt, but thank you for the rendering.
You're welcome. So yeah, if you take a look at the rendering, you can see that there's green space up front, there's green space around the sides, some ornamental trees that are planted, there's outdoor seating for both the 110 grill and the Starbucks and other space to the right. The buildings are pulled right up close to the street to make them more pedestrian friendly. There are cuts from the sidewalk directly across that green space into all the tenant spaces to try and make it more pedestrian friendly for the folks who are downtown and want to walk to these new uses. And just architecturally, a lot of work has gone into trying to make it look like a nice facade. It is at a different angle than the image that was just pulled up. I'd argue that it's not worlds different from the image that was just pulled up in the master planning documents. But this is a sketch of the proposal. Brixmor had discussions with city staff regarding the proposal at the outset, and the feedback at the time was that the planning staff wanted to see more density, meaning multi-story buildings. Ruben can speak more to this in a minute, but Brixmor explored that possibility at the time, but couldn't agree to the additional stories on the new buildings along the front of the site because doing so would violate the lease provisions for the major existing tenants to the rear of the site with respect to visibility. That being said, Brixmor hears the city loud and clear. They're open to the possibility of having second stories on these buildings in the future when they're not constrained by their existing leases, and committed to both designing and building these buildings such that additional stories could be added on top in the future when they're able to do so with their existing leases. Back in February, we went to the ZBA for a handful of variances on this project, including a variance to allow the drive-through restaurant and a variance for the reduced stacking spaces in the drive-through. The ZBA granted all the variances for the project except for the drive-through variances. And they were generally very supportive of the entire project, including the drive-through, but felt that the variance criteria couldn't technically be met. So after that, the mayor asked us to propose some language to allow the project to move forward by way of zoning amendment, which we did and which is what's before you from us tonight. Essentially, our amendment would allow the drive-through restaurants in this portion of the OCP district with reduced stacking spaces on large lots such as this lot. And the purpose and the intent is to allow drive-throughs on lots that are large enough to accommodate the vehicle traffic and the queuing that can sometimes occur with drive-throughs without any risk of overflow or spilling into any public roads or have any public impact off the site. You saw a copy of the site plan. I'm going to switch plans to the site plan that shows the drive-through in the space right here, which just omitted, I think, is green space in the plan that you saw a moment ago from Sam. And you can see when you look at where the drive-through is located, that it's very central on the frontage of Store Street. This is Store Street right down here. And so this is the traffic light on Pleasant Street with the entrance into the plaza right here. And the other entrance down by, the old liquor store building on the other side of the property. And so this just relates to the issue of reduced stacking spaces, in that in the unlikely event that there is a backup or problem with the drive-through and things overflow, the lot is large enough, the drive-through is far enough away from the property entrances that there's really no risk of any impact off the site. That being said, the city's counter proposal on providing data to allow a conditional use permit for reduced stacking, I think, is agreeable to Brixmor. The reason why the drive-through was designed as it is with 6 stacking spaces was really twofold. The first was that Starbucks requirements were I think even less than the 6 spaces we're proposing. I think Starbucks only required 5 spaces for their design. And 2, the more stacking spaces we add here, the more impact it has on the rest of the parking field, and the more parking spaces are eliminated from a site that is currently underparked. We got a variance to allow further reduced parking. So we understand that the planning staff's primary objection to our proposal is that it doesn't provide enough density for this area. And in an ideal world, if we weren't constrained by the existing leases of the major tenants in the rear of the shopping center, we'd simply add a second story to these new buildings, and I think everybody would be relatively happy and move forward. However, we can't do that because of the existing leases. But we aren't building something, our proposal here isn't to build something that forecloses the possibility of adding additional stories and achieving the density that planning staff would like to see for this area. as I mentioned, Brixmor is committed, both in meetings with staff and on the record with the ZBA, to both design and build these buildings to support additional stories to be added in the future when they're able to do so. So we see this project right now as a dramatic improvement for the plaza and for the area. Right now, it's just a vast parking field, and we think it's a good step in the right direction towards the city's, grander vision for the area. We too would like to achieve the staff's vision, but think it would be a loss to the city if the front of the property remains a vast parking field until the lease constraints and the long-term leases expire. So we're hopeful that you will consider recommending the proposal as we've presented it, although we're happy to have a dialogue about it. And I know that Ruben has some additional comments that he would like to make just about the property and his kind of plans and constraints as well.
Yeah, thank you, John. You summarized our vision and our plan 100%. So I'd say for the last 3 years or probably plus, I know at least our company has been in discussions with staff and the city on what this site can look like, and looking at the master planning. In my last 2.5 years of being with the company working on this property, I've had similar discussions. The way we approach these type of projects and these centers is first looking at what our restrictions are. And we currently have 3 to 4 major national tenants with lease terms until 2035 plus, that basically does not allow us to build any more than what we're showing you today. And that is including Market Basket, Burlington, Marshalls, and Joann's. Joann's is in the back there, 10,000 square feet. You might not think of it as that large, but it is a national tenant. We do this across the nation. I've developed many lifestyle mixed-use centers in my career. This is our first stage of how we're looking to connect Main Street to our center and Store Street, and the first stage of a redevelopment. I've heard staff and the master plan, I've read it, of how we can intensify this site. I have to say, adding a second story above a 7,000 to 9,000 square foot building and building 14 units does not achieve that. The real opportunity is getting a block of space where you can build real density, parking that's required for that density, and really creating a lifestyle center. To build limited amount of units, not self-parked, but parked within the rest of the center, I don't think does the project or the vision of the city justice. But withstanding that, we've heard comments, and like John said, we're looking to future-proof the plan. And if that availability comes up in the future where we could come up with a huge block of property, if Burlington ever goes away, if Marshalls ever goes away, if Bank of America goes away, there are opportunities where we could really create that block of density. And then you can add the 1 or 2 stories above this building to complement types of units. Maybe these are larger units, maybe condo, maybe loft-like, and the other buildings more of your typical apartments. That's what we look at when I develop mixed-use properties. You're trying to get those complementary of uses so that everybody is integrated. We start with our restrictions, and then we start with, okay, who are the tenants who want to be here? And we think that we've attracted, at least at this point, 2 strong tenants, both 110 Grill, who's I know wanted to be in this marketplace for a long time, bringing them to the corner, really being that kind of anchor to the corner and bringing that walkability to the downtown, outdoor seating, and then a coffee shop like Starbucks, a no name. Obviously, they have the requirements of a drive-through, and then obviously there'll be some future tenants. But I think you see in the rendering here, we're trying to create that walkability this start of a lifestyle of in between 110 Grill and maybe the corner being another restaurant, you know, a green area where people can be doing activities, you know, during the day or in the evening. You know, similar to the project in Bedford, the marketplace project there. So, you know, we're looking to achieve that in the first stage of our project. But with Starbucks coming, they also want the drive-through, and we feel obviously staff is recommending the traffic that's associated with the restaurant may not be as much as a Starbucks. It's a complementary use to the rest of the center. We'll prove in the conditional use that across the board, like John said, Starbucks only requires, you know, 5 stacking spaces above and beyond what is required from the town, or less than what's required from the town. So this is our first attempt, and we hope the board agrees with us that this is somewhat attractive to connect Main Street to Store Street and to our center, and we hope we continue this dialogue. You know, I think for the last couple of years, nobody can predict the future. Who would have thought 3 months ago we would have all been doing a Zoom planning board because of COVID-19, right? And who knows what that will bring for future of the tenants and future of what even lifestyle mixed use centers look like, and what the planners are going to tell us what the future holds. So that's kind of my 2 cents. If there's any questions, I'm here. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I know we got some questions from the board, and I'll get to you in just a sec. I just want to clarify one thing, Mr. Arnold, that you said. So the rendering that we see on the screen here is showing what I believe are 2-story buildings, but you're saying that would you build them to look like this, or would you build them as single-story buildings and not look like this at all?
So I'll answer that question, Chairman. Okay. So these are actual renderings. They're typically, our typical buildings here are about 24 feet in the retail type. So they're looking like possibly a 2-story residential building, maybe with, you know, 11-foot floor to ceiling with, you know, the typical mechanical areas between floor to ceiling. You know, some of the parapets might go up to 30 feet, architectural elements, but across the board, they're typically 24 feet. So we would be building it to look like this.
Okay, and what type of limitations are you having from your national tenants? That's not considered a 2-story building?
No, so we're allowed to. I forget. I should have had that information, but it's limited to 1 story, and it's typically under the 25 feet. So even if we wanted to go 2-story and 25 feet, which is probably nearly impossible with all the mechanical units and everything else. We want to be able to do that. So it is limited to a 1-story provision.
Okay, and signage, as far as signage for this, I know that's putting the cart before the horse, but you know, you've got a ton of space here. You envisioning, if you envisioned, say, this is phase 1, and if you had phase 1 done in, you know, 5 years or 3 years, would you be able to do phase 2 and go, you know, south on Store Street with more density? At what point do you run out of front storage or front space to be able to do it as far as parking goes?
Great question. I wish I could answer that. I think it's going to be based on the tenant's lease and the viability of those tenants. You know, if Marshalls tells us tomorrow they don't want to renew their lease and they're closing as a company, we create opportunity. If, you know, they continue on until 2035, we could be stuck until 2035. It's not what you want to hear, but I gotta live with what my current leases tell me.
Yep. Okay. Okay, Councilor Pierce, I know you had your hand up. If you have a question, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I was jotting down questions, and some have been answered, such as the lease in 2035. So that sort of puts it out of reach. Now, as I look at this drive-through, this is, and I look at the plans, this is enclosed entirely on private property. There are no curb cuts that are going out onto Store Street. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And, well, I'll ask that of planning, but as long as I have you guys. With this zoning, I guess I would ask this of Heather. With the change, what we're talking about, can the ordinance be changed or the zoning be changed to allow internal drive-throughs? I mean, I think of the number of drive-throughs in the city, not counting Loudon Road, but we have McDonald's. Those are I would guess an internal drive-through. Would that be considered the same?
Well, so a few things. The drive-throughs are always required to be internal. No drive-throughs in the city should be flowing out into public streets. It's not really a matter of whether it's internal or external. There are a number of requirements and provisions pertaining to drive-throughs, and I can't recall all of them. But for instance, one of them is that the drive, and these are safety related, these are traffic, pedestrian, safety related provisions. So for instance, one is that a drive-through cannot block a loading or a parking space. So if you look at their plan and you see that the overflow of, if they in fact needed, if they're only providing 6, but they actually needed 10, the overflow would go into the drive aisles of the parking spaces or other drive aisles. So that's not acceptable. That wouldn't be allowed today on any private property. You would need a variance, and we generally have made, we've generally worked with property owners to figure out how to provide additional stacking that meets the requirements. In one case, the stacking jumped over a drive aisle and then continued, across the way. But there's really no significance to saying that it's all internal, because that's always the case. There's no cases where where it would not be internal.
Okay, but follow up if I could, Mr. Chair.
Certainly, yeah.
Specifically, how would an internal drive-through that goes into the parking lot affect pedestrian traffic along Store Street?
It's not about the pedestrian traffic on Store Street. It's about the pedestrian and traffic circulation within the site, within the parking area. So these are just basic zoning ordinance requirements already. And that we would not change that. That's not, we can ask David Cedarholm. He's a city engineer and he is on this call. If he would chime in, because this is really an engineering related issue and a traffic.
That's okay. That's okay. I just wondered how it affected, and I think you answered that. Yeah. Just a couple more questions. With this proposed language, this has a limited area of application, does it not? We're talking about the east side of Store Street. We're talking about in Pennacook. So is there a limited application of this type in these zones, whether it be the drive-throughs and so on and so forth?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
So right now, the way that it's currently written in the existing code says that retail development is allowed in certain locations in the OCP district, and it specifically prohibits retail in the Southern Opportunity Corridor, and that was for historical reasons about types of development that were proposed there in the past that the community was very in opposition to. So this restaurant, I'm assuming, would also be considered retail. So just by nature of the existing code, it would be allowed in those certain areas. So I believe it's the Central Opportunity Corridor, possibly also the Northern Opportunity Corridor. I would have to look at the language more specifically. In the proposed code, we are not proposing to split it up in those ways, because it's really not a good planning practice. But under the existing code, it's already only certain areas that retail is allowed.
Well, if I may, just respond to that as well. I think, Heather, when you said what's in the proposed code, you're talking about the staff's kind of counter proposal. In terms of the proposal that we've submitted, the drive-throughs would only be allowed in a very small portion of the OCP district, and that's the area that lies east of Storrs Street and between Loudon Road and Water Street.
So no, when I was talking about the proposed code, I was talking about the proposed form-based code. So with the applicant's proposal, that's something that we also did not support. Is they're essentially what that proposal does is tries to just make it so it can be only specifically in one area. And I mean, generally in terms of like good planning practice, if a use is appropriate for a district, then it should be appropriate everywhere in that district. We don't generally try to specifically tool districts in that way, just to prevent uses from that may not be appropriate from actually proliferating. So we're not really in favor of that, because it's not our goal just as planners to allow a drive-through only in this location and nowhere else.
And just one last question. And I think you talked about it earlier, Heather, about, the balance between economic development and the master plan. And I certainly appreciate all the work that people put into master plan. But when is the last time something was done on this property that would generate tax dollars?
I'm unaware.
Okay.
I don't know the history of it.
All right. I like the proposal. I know we have a long ways to go, but I think this looks promising, and I would hate to see how they say the perfect be the enemy of the good. So, but thank you very much. Thank you for the presentations.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
I have my hand up. Hold on.
Yeah, I see it, Teresa. Sorry, I didn't look
Oops,
there.
now I
Yep.
can't figure out, am I mute or not?
No, you're on. You're on. We can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I've gotten totally confused here with all my screens. The question I have is for the drawing. If I understand this correctly, the buildings that are proposed are one story, and they would be consistent with the buildings that are there now, meaning Marshall's and the liquor store, et cetera. They're all one-story buildings. Are these about the same height?
That's correct.
Okay. And as I understand it, what you have your hands tied about doing, did I understand this correctly, a second story until 2035?
Correct.
And that's because the current tenants, whatever their leases, do not allow that obstruction of by having 2 stories.
That's correct.
Of their stores.
Yep.
Thank you. So if I understand you correctly, this is about all you can do for the next 14 to 15 years.
At this time, yes.
Okay. Is there any plan to redevelop the Burlington Coat Factory, that whole space back there in Market Basket?
So we continue conversations with all of our tenants on an ongoing basis. Market Basket, I'm sure this board knows they came probably about 10 years ago for site plan expansion. Right. That conversation has been happening with Brixmor for 10 years. They have not committed to spending the capital and doing that at this time. But we pushed them to do it, to bring the store to a modern time. When they do that, that also allows us to renegotiate a lease to create opportunity. But that is not on the table currently. One of the things we'd like to do possibly with this project is update the facade for the rest of the center to bring it to a modern look. We need to get permission from all the tenants to do that. We are always in conversations with Burlington, but currently there's no plans on the table there either. we constantly do talk to them, but nothing at this time.
So one other quick question, if I may, please. So if this is all changed, when would you look to get this underway?
So I believe if this motion is carried by council, we'd probably be back to this planning board in August, September. So looking at the winter, we'd probably maybe try to start our site work quickly, but it would probably be a 2021 spring start.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I started to ask a question about signage, but Mr. Tversky, I don't know if there's any options for variances on the signage from the city's perspective on top of the buildings, or again, I want to see that original vision of dense 2-3 story buildings, and realize we might not be able to get there, but that's kind of my angle. So is there, I guess my question to you would be, would those tenants be interested in signage that maybe was on top of the building or whatnot to, again, make sure that they could be seen from Store Street and Pleasant Street Extension?
Yeah, we haven't had those concrete conversations here with the tenants. We have similar conversations on other parcels with similar tenants. It's typically their full facade that they want to be visible and present. It's not just a sign. They don't want to be tucked. They don't want to be tucked behind a wall or a canyon. I think, and this probably shoots myself in the foot. I've done projects before where you have a supermarket and you have the signage on top of a 3-story apartment building above, but the supermarket knew as they were coming in that 300 residential units were being built on top of it, and kind of it was being self-fed, right? Besides the community. I don't have that here. So it's still hard, and I know it's a known entity that Market Basket is here and that Burlington's here, but the tenants still want to have their full facade pretty much visible. So it's hard. Might not be logical, but it's hard.
All right, Heather, you had a question?
Well, I guess I wanted to follow up on what John was just saying, but I do have a separate question. So you're saying at this time you haven't really approached them to see whether they would be open to that. I mean, I think it would be great if I would really love to just sit down with the tenants, with a representative from them, and have a conversation if that's possible, to say, hey, the city, with the planning office, I can't speak for the whole city or the zoning board, but to sort of mitigate their concerns about visibility with some type of signage, to see if that's something they would consider. Because I think it would really be worth it if you could get any headway there with an actual conversation. I mean, if they flat out say no, well, then that's the answer. But it seems worth it to just reach out and say, hey, can we have this conversation? Because that's huge. That's a really pivotal point there. If they would consider some alternative signage to mitigate their concerns about visibility, I for one would really love to pursue that with them. So that's one question that I have. And then the other one is a little bit more technical. So I understand you're not allowed to have 2 stories, but what I'm not understanding is what you're showing us is basically a 2-story building. So I understand that commercial first floors can be quite tall, but I'm wondering why they would be okay with 1 story that's 25 feet, but not 2 stories that are 25 feet. Because that picture, the original picture that Rich asked Sam to put up, is essentially that's what it's showing. And it's, I mean, it would be great if something like that could occur. I also just want to clarify, we city staff, like planning office, we weren't hoping for just 1 story on top of a Starbucks. I mean, what we really would like is 2, 3, or 4 stories on top, but that it'd be really unreasonable to write that into the code. So, we went as far as we thought we could reasonably do, which is just to say 1 additional story, hoping that would spur, a tenant or the property owner to put more on there. But that's a separate issue. but I guess my question remains is why they are okay with one story that's 25 feet, but not two stories that are the same height? Because what you're showing really is what we would envision as a two-story building.
So from the technical perspective, it's probably close.
Happens to all of us.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Now it happens to all of us.
I'm sorry. Stuck with family drama. Yeah, so it might appear to be two-story, but in the retail world, this is one story. And if I have a retail presence on, if I have another story on top of this, it's really almost like a three-story building, because no retail tenants can accept less than their typical ceiling height. And again, it's like I said to the chairman before, it might not sound logical, but it's what the retail tenants restrict. So it's a height and a story. If I can get 3 stories in 25 feet, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. So I'll probably have to go back to them and get a waiver and a lease revision.
Gotcha.
Okay. Teresa, I saw your hand go up and then come down. I don't know if you had a question or not.
Well, I kind of did, which was, I'm assuming if I look back at the rendering, the Starbucks and all of these are about the height that we see all over the state of Starbucks. Is this a different design than what we see out on Loudon Road or in other parts of the state?
No, this is their typical prototype.
That's what I have to tell you. I don't think of that as being 2 stories, but that's what I thought. Thank you.
Chairman, I have another question, if I could, please.
Certainly.
Question to Mr. Arnold. Could you give us some background on Brixmor and what's their track record in doing these types of projects?
I think Ruben is the Brixmor rep. I'm the lawyer representing them, so Ruben is the better one to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, we are a publicly traded REIT, well capitalized. When we come to a town and we show them what we're going to do, as long as we get a favorable approval, we're building and working with the town. Our slogan is actually "Our community is yours." We want to be integrated into the larger community. And if you look at several of our centers, we have art murals, and that's something we've actually talked about, is maybe decorating the back of this center with some type of more decorative art mural along 93, so they're not just staring at a blanket ugly wall and loading area. So yeah, our tracker can talk for itself. We are 420 properties nationally, about 150 in the Northeast, probably about 20 in the New England area. The closest project we just completed in Bedford, New Hampshire. You can talk to them. We produced what we were going to do. We actually took an old Hannaford supermarket and brought a Boston Interiors and Bed Bath & Beyond and renovated the entire facade of the building to look more in line to a local Bedford community. So.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from the audience? I don't think I don't see anybody with their hand up in the audience.
No.
Okay, so let's step back. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input and for your testimony. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing portion of tonight and look back at the report here again on our packet. If you want to take a look at the report, and again, I think that the image that I'm seeing on the screen here is much more akin to what I had Sam pull up on page 3 of the report. It doesn't look exactly obviously like it, but it's pretty close. So Heather, help me here on the report, because this isn't a traditional report with the pieces and parts on it that I'm used to seeing, but obviously page six gets to the meat of what we need to address, if we could.
So I guess I have, let me help with a bit of not clarification, but try to get this. I'm gonna actually bring up, just give me a moment. I'm going to bring up the amendment, the actual recommendation that staff made. Just give me a moment here. Ordinance. So, sorry, I'm just reading really quickly to try to. Okay, so the main changes in the amendment are really have to do. There's two really have to do with the drive-through and the stacking spaces. So and I don't know how members of the board feel, but I feel like I've heard enough support of the drive-through that I want to offer an alternative for the board to recommend to City Council. So if it's the case that a majority of the board members are in favor of allowing the drive-through, my recommendation would be that you recommend to Council to simply allow the drive-through consistent with staff's recommendation for a drive-through. In other words, I would not recommend approval of their proposal before you, simply because staff, there's a lot in it, or not a lot, but there's several things in it that I don't think even they really need. They were trying to present something to us that they felt we would like. So I would just allow the drive-through, period, without all that other stuff. But I continue to recommend that an amendment for a CUP be made, and that you deny the request to reduce the stacking spaces, because that just doesn't make sense for other businesses and other properties in the city. However, as I think John said, it wouldn't be a problem for Brixmor to provide the documentation and to get the stacking spaces reduced. So I think a recommendation to simply allow the drive-through and to recommend that a CUP amendment be made, allowing the stacking spaces to be reduced, would be my next best alternative proposal at this time. And that's if a majority of the board members are in favor of allowing the drive-through. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yep. So I don't know what that other stuff was as far as whatever the amendments were and whatnot, but as far as what's before us tonight. So we've heard testimony, we've seen images, we've looked at the renderings, we've seen the grand plan for the 2030 master plan. And when you look at everything, if you're locked into this is what it's going to be until 2035, I can, on the record, I like the look of this. I was opposed to it when I kind of first started off, but seeing the renderings and seeing that they're not little low, flat, little spots that are similar on, say, Loudon Road, I think this has a very nice appeal. And certainly when other things are stacked up next to it on the other side of Store Street or down towards Water Street, it is going to generate the type of density that I think we want. So before us is the question of what?
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
If you made that recommendation, staff would retool our proposal, and we would also work in coordination with John and Ruben to make sure that what we were proposing, and I'm only saying this because they indicated that they were okay with the CUP idea. So we would work with them to draft something that worked for all of us, that worked for both parties, and to send to City Council.
Okay, so what's before us then, as far as the pieces are that we as a board, we can poll everybody and take a vote. Are we in favor of allowing drive-throughs in this district, and are we opposed to reducing the amount of stacking spaces? Those are the two items, right?
Yeah, I would ask to stop sharing. John, if you could stop sharing the screen so all board members can see each other.
Here, let me try and figure out how to do that. Is that off now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I don't know if you need to do a roll call vote or what's the best way to kind of get a feel for the audience. I mean, if you raise your hand, how do you want me to phrase the question to get an idea of what the board's the board's sense is, Heather?
I think we could just have a discussion. People.
So let's just ask around. So let me get some feedback, open mic feedback, if we can. Teresa, John, Earl, what's your thoughts and process? So those two items that I mentioned, are you in favor of recommending that to council or not? Anybody?
Oh.
John, sorry.
I wasn't on. I have a question. Would everything else that's been proposed would be acceptable other than the drive-through, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Drive-through is the issue?
Yep.
So everything else, part of me would like to see the higher density, but sort of everything else would be, something that could be done. It's just the drive-through is the issue. And I guess I'm not opposed to it, given you do wonder about the, a coffee shop like that being busy and having the traffic bump up into the other parking lot and sort of taking up those spaces. So I think if there was a CUP where they had to do a traffic study, I would be in favor of that. Even though I would prefer to have higher density, but recognizing they probably can have that, everything else other than the drive-through.
And recognize that this is a change for the whole district. So we could have then a month from now another proposal on the other side of Store Street for a Dunkin' Donuts and a Taco Bell or something. I don't know, but that's the risk we run. And that was originally the thought, was once you open the door, you can't put the horse back in the barn. So I want to make sure we as a board recognize that.
And it doesn't improve the area. I mean, the proposal does improve the area, which is attractive.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, did you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with the drive-through in general. I just think I've been to these types of drive-throughs in other cities, and I think that it does cause problems in the parking lot. But I'm not a big fan of it. But certainly, I wouldn't oppose it necessarily. But I'm just not a big fan of it. I do like the project though, and I think that it will create much improved lot on Store Street. And I do think that it is in keeping with what we were talking about. Even if there is no occupancy in a second story, it does look like 2 stories. So it would fit in with future development on either side.
Okay. Anybody else have a thought? Teresa or Earl, you want to weigh in? Earl?
I think I made my comments earlier. I do worry about the leases. There's always something probably that can be done. I don't dislike the idea of Heather speaking, with the folks that are there. I don't know that I want signs on top of the building behind it. That creates issues. But I hate to see that go fallow for another 15 years. I mean, I think it can be an anchor. I'm not sure that there is property across the street on the west side of stores for any other drive-throughs. I'm comforted in knowing that the drive-throughs in this area are all on private property. But I like the looks of it, and I think it will draw people to Store Street. So I'm not sure yet what we're voting on, but I'm in favor of it. So if the language comes out something like that, I'm okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Teresa, any thoughts?
Yep, I think it's much of an improvement. First, I was concerned with Starbucks that they were going to take business away from some of the downtown coffee shops. But frankly, I don't think many of the people who are down in that shopping plaza are going up down to Main Street, parking their car and getting coffee. First of all, you have to pay for it. You have to pay for parking. So I don't have a problem with it. And I think if it is an improvement immediately, then that's where we are. We'll see where things are in 15 years. I think with this pandemic, I applaud you guys that you actually want to build retail, considering where things are. I agree totally with Earl about the signage. I really don't want to see those lit up, because I work not too far from there, those multicolored neon signs. I don't really like looking like Las Vegas. And I worry about signage. We certainly don't want it on the buildings. I do like the idea of a mural. I'm assuming you meant on the back of the building that faces 93. I will say, when I moved up here from Washington, D.C., I said to my husband, "You've got to be kidding. You want me to live there?" And it was all because of what you saw coming up on 93 was the back of those buildings. So a mural would be great. My take is it's a move forward. And I can't imagine you're going to have 20 cars in line for a Starbucks, but maybe you will.
You very well might. And again, I want to make sure that we're looking at it with the eyes wide open on, like you said, everywhere from Water Street all the way up the whole corridor is what we're talking about here. So that's my concern is we do it for one, we do it for everybody. And I just don't know if I'm comfortable doing that. So
can I chime in, Rich?
Yeah.
So the amendment that staff proposed, one of the criteria is that direct pedestrian access from the public street, in other words, the public sidewalk, to the restaurant building shall be provided without crossing parking areas, drive aisles, or any other vehicle accessible area. So in other words, any future drive-through would be required to be on the street the same way the Starbucks is. So you would never see a Dunkin' Donuts the way that you see on Loudon Road or any of those that have driving aisles between the street and the building. It would always have to be, and we can even add other language to sort of solidify that. I don't know if that helps you.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, again, I think I want to try to look at the big picture, but I don't want to stifle the development. I think we've got a bird in the hand, and I want to see the type of development that we envision from the planning docs and from the charrettes and from the master plan. I just don't want to see it. I guess if it's this particular space, Mr. Twersky, I heard you say Bank of America. So is this owner that owns this entire plaza, Market Basket, say all the way to Burlington Coat Factory? They also own the Bank of America. So all the way up to the parking garage is their space on that side of the Store Street, right?
Correct. Yeah, we own Bank of America as well. It's a separate parcel, but it's under our lease. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So you're talking about a locked up area that is private property that, unless something happened by eminent domain, you're talking to the people here that are going to develop it. I just don't know. I don't know where to go. But, okay. So Heather, help me out here. So we've got, I think, a split decision or a split thought process from the board's perspective as far as the ordinance changes go, and I'm certainly willing to throw it up on the agenda, or throw it up to a vote where we look at the discussion points that you've outlined in your packet here. Section 28-10-4 of the zoning ordinance outlines the following criteria in the planning board to evaluate and considering an amendment to the zoning ordinance to the zoning map, and it's outlined there in A through G. And it's pretty clear and cut and dried. If we want to put a proposal up to say, do we want to recommend to City Council that an ordinance change be made with the following language, given that we may want to be changing it, or do we say we?
I would. Well, from what I hear from all the board members, to me it sounds like, one, people want to let the drive-through happen to make the project go forward, and two, people aren't opposed to a CUP to allow them to reduce the stacking. So I would simply recommend, my suggestion would be that the board's recommendation be that staff work with the applicant to allow the drive-through and create a CUP amendment, and that go before council.
Could I add something? When I look, if I may please, when I look at prior council meeting back on March 9th, we had talked about this and we had a referral to the community development and legal. And some of the notes were, number one, designate the properties along Store Street currently in the OCP district as having the following performance district standards. A, allow drive-throughs as a permitted use and with reduced stacking where the property meets certain acreage requirements, i.e. at least 10 acres. And all stacking can be accommodated on site without risk of overflow onto public streets. 1B, eliminate minimum parking requirements, which is consistent with CBP district across Store Street. And C, eliminate front setback requirements, which is also consistent with the CBP district across Store Street. So that was the direction from the council to community development and legal.
So Earl, that was actually the original proposal that Brixmor made before they got their variances. That's exactly what that was.
Okay. All right, thank
That's
you.
what we've sort of moved past that
All
point
right.
to this point.
That was
So
just
why
in my
doesn't
notes,
this,
I think.
why doesn't this fall into the variance aspect, Heather? This use, say a non-permitted use, why wouldn't it fall into a variance for
They
a drive-through?
requested a variance but didn't receive one.
Okay, so they didn't get it from zoning. So
Right.
this is the next step, which is to change the ordinance
Right.
to allow it by right.
Correct.
Okay. So how do
You
we
want me
move
to-
forward?
And do you want me to repeat what I just said and take a vote? To
Yeah,
see if that's
please.
what people
Yeah.
would like to do?
Yep.
So my
Yep.
suggestion was that staff work with the applicant to amend the ordinance to allow drive-through restaurants and to create a CUP for reduced parking.
Okay. So can we take a vote on that? Can I get a motion? Or how do you want to handle that? Or we just do it as a vote to council, right? We like the motion.
You
So
can
you
make
take
a
a roll
motion.
call vote?
Yeah, you can do a motion to say that that is your recommendation.
So that's a motion. So I'll make that motion. I don't know if anybody wants to second that motion.
Well, I just wonder what, that's the only thing discussion. There'll be further discussions on the project itself. This doesn't.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
This does not.
yeah, yeah.
negate-
No.
Okay. All right.
No.
So I will second
This
that.
just. Okay, so we got a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, Heather.
Chairman Woodfin,
Aye.
Counselor Pierce,
Aye.
Member Rosenberger,
Aye.
Member Hicks,
Aye.
Member Regan.
Aye.
Okay, so that's pretty. That's exactly what you thought, Heather. So good read of the conversations as we went through. So that will be the recommendation that we push over to council, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So what's the next step from the applicant standpoint? They'll work with you. They'll work with you to
Yeah, well,
kind of move forward.
So what we will do is we will revise our proposal and we will send it to John Arnold and ask him to respond and reach out to us to make sure that, and then try to get it on the next council agenda for, July. So we'll need to do this in the next few days.
Okay, great. All right, so let's wrap that one up and we'll move on. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your testimony. Mr. Twersky, thank you. Mr. Arnold, thank you. I know it's been a long process, but hopefully we can move forward.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the board. Thank you, Heather and staff. So we look forward to working on this project further. So have a
Great.
great night.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, I think that takes us to the end of our agenda, Heather. Is that right? So other business, any other business? We made it. Any other business to come before the board tonight? Do you have anything, Heather or Sam or Beth?
Nope.
Nope. Any member of the board have anything needs to be brought up? If not, we'll take a motion to adjourn from Mr. Pierce. Would you like to make a motion to adjourn? And Mr. Regan, would you like to second that?
So move.
Second.
All right, it's been made and motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor by hand, aye, everybody?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for your endurance, and we will hopefully see you in council chambers soon enough. So.
Thank
Rich,
you all. Have a good evening. Stay
Bye,
safe.
everybody.
Thank you.
Rich, I think you got a career in talk radio.
Everybody.